Yeah.
All right, we're on the air.
And hello, good Sunday evening out there. It's Will Coley and my awesome co-host, Davi Barker.
How's it going?
We're good, guys. It's the Call to Freedom show on LRN.FM. We're back again on Sunday night, and I'm feeling good. I think we got a pretty decent episode lined up for us tonight. We're waiting on the rest of our guests to join us. We've got Davi, of course, in line. We also have with us tonight a special guest. He is running for the nomination for the Libertarian Party presidential candidacy. He is also the founder and editor of FPP Publications and the co-founder of the Shire Free Church, Mr. Darryl W Perry.
Thanks for having me on, Will.
Yeah.
And,
how's it going, Darryl?
I'm not sure exactly who the host, maybe both of you are the host, but whomever made the decision, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, the other one's a pathogen, I think. So I have a useless piece of trivia, and I bet, Darryl, you could verify this.
Okay.
Because I know this is your sort of area of interest. But in the early period of the Americas, German was 6 votes away from being the official language of the United States of America. Did you know that?
I've heard that, and I've done some research, and there is no official language of the United States of America.
I know, it's the weirdest thing. If you were listening to any other radio show, you would think that the official language was English.
There are a few states that do have an official language, and since we're talking about useless or interesting trivia, there are 3 states that are officially bilingual.
Wow, really?
Can you name them?
No.
Florida,
Not
Texas,
either
and
language.
California.
Negative. It is not California. It would be New Mexico, which has English and Spanish. Louisiana has English and French, and Hawaii has English and Hawaiian.
Well, cool.
That's a new wrinkle in my brain that wasn't there before.
That's what I'm here for, just to wrinkle your brain.
I should mention that Darryl is running for president.
I did mention that he was running for the Libertarian Party nomination to be the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party.
How's that going, Darryl?
It's going pretty good. I'm actually doing a fundraiser today because today is my 38th birthday.
Dun, dun, dun.
Soup Geburtstag, Phil Gluck.
Thank you. I think, or as the Germans would say, Dankeschön.
Bitte. That's the extent of my German, but if not for 6 votes, you'd all be speaking German.
So I am doing a fundraiser today, and I've raised enough money to be able to attend a few of the upcoming LP state conventions. I'm still not at my goal. The goal was $3,000, and the last time I looked, I was at about 41% of the goal.
Okay.
But
I'm going to the Minneapolis convention if you want me to take some flyers for you.
Okay, yeah, certainly. I could send you some flyers because the Minneapolis convention is the same day as the Louisiana convention that I've already confirmed to attend.
Oh, we'll pincer them then. They can't split us up, Darryl.
This is going to be awesome. Like this whole like underground renegade libertarian nomination candidacy thing going on, where like even the national party heads are like, it's not going to happen. Like, we don't care if it's not going to happen. We're still going to do everything we can to kind of make a mockery of the entire system and, show that, it doesn't really matter what party you're running in. It looks like the parties are going to do what they want to do, regardless of, the will of the people or, the supporters of the party in general.
Right. And I was reading an article from, I forget who it was from, but they were quoting Ron Paul. And Ron Paul basically said something to the effect of the only reason to run for political office is to spread ideas. And that's
Sure.
then I'm running. I know that there are some people that, they'll say, well, we have to soften the message and then we can meet this vote threshold and get this government money. Or if we do this, then we can, wind up this and that. But we have to soften the message. And I say, no, you do not have to soften the message. In fact, softening the message, I would dare say, is antithetical to liberty.
I would, for me, this is a standard with candidates. I won't support a candidate that wants to be elected. Can you imagine the sick sociopath that gets into politics for the sake of procuring power instead of spreading a message?
Well, not only that, but that's technically a sin. I mean, the idea of not giving power to a person who seeks it, that was something that the prophets always said was a mark of the believing community, was that if there were those who sought power among them, they would do everything that they could to make sure that person did not get that power, because those who are attracted to power are usually the ultimately corruptible, or the ultimately corrupt in general. I mean, what's that? The necessity is the mantra of tyrants. Like the worst words you can ever hear are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Yeah, and I actually saw a video one time where I think it was Taryn Lupo had gone to some national park, and the national park girl was some, like young high school, maybe right out of high school, college student sort of thing that she was working there. And they were putting on this sort of skit, and there was some fluffy squirrel, and she had a line where the squirrel was, in danger, and she had to tell the squirrel, "Don't worry, squirrel, I'm from the government. I'm here to help." And she couldn't say it with a straight face.
All right, now our second guest is
the whole thing about seeking power. If by some weird stretch of the imagination or some chance I were to be elected, I don't think I could actually take the oath of office.
Well, we should put together a policy package that doesn't involve taking the oath of office. What can the president do before he takes the oath of office?
Technically, the president takes over as president at noon on January 20th of the year that the swearing in happened.
Well, there you go. You just got to stall.
Whether he actually takes the oath or not, that's the date and time prescribed in the Constitution. And I forget who it was had made mention to Ian Freeman, who's running for governor or will be running for governor in New Hampshire. And Ian said, "What would happen if I wound up getting elected? I couldn't take the oath." And they said, "Just say Assalamu alaikum." Just make a
consistent swear on a Quran.
When they ask you, so help you God. Just
you should swear on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what I would insist on swearing on.
Don't panic.
All right. So, and we also have our second guest on with us now. He is director for the American Center for Outreach in Nashville, Tennessee, and I believe also the director for the American Muslim Advisory Council. He is from Texas, has done quite a bit of interfaith work in Texas before he moved to Nashville, Tennessee. His name is Paul Galloway. Hello, Paul. What's up? Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, what's up? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How's everybody?
Pretty good. How are you?
Oh, man, I can't complain.
So I guess the first thing I really kind of want to get into tonight is going to be something we're probably not going to be able to cover much of it before we get to the break. But Darryl is involved in a fight for freedom right now. He is in the process of a struggle for religious liberty right here in America. That's right. Here in America, you still have to ask for government permission to be considered a religion or to have a church. You have to go to the state and ask the state, "Mommy, Daddy, dearest, please, sir, may I have the right to be considered a religious tradition? May I have the right to have a church?" Even if you come from an established tradition or if there are other established traditions that are very, very similar to your own. And this is something that I think we should all find absolutely shocking. But unfortunately, we're going to have to get into when we get back. So when we come back, we'll have our other guest host with us, Alexander Snitker, and we'll talk about the struggle of the Shire Free Church. All right, so we are back. Will Coley, Davi Barker, the call to freedom on LRN.FM. Getting into the second segment was we went out. Our second guest host got with us. Now, this gentleman is a guy that I've known for a little while. We met when I was working on AM radio in Orlando, Florida, on WORL on a show called Tea Party Patriots Live, Right Wing Extreme Radio. That was back in my Tea Party days, probably about 6 years ago. And he started a little show that got a lot of traction, became quite popular in Florida. He also ran for Senate in Florida against Marco Rubio. That's how we met. But he was the host of the Liberty Underground radio show in Tampa, Florida. And I wanted to have him on the air, and he's with us now, Mr. Alex Snitker.
How are you doing, Will? Everything. There's so many stories to tell just based off of what you just said. I know we're not getting into any of that tonight, but I would love to do a show off of that whole thing that you just talked about. But we'll do that. Not about my part, but I'm talking about like you going over to that radio station, when you got there, how it changed, and how, it all just went crazy after that. So. Yeah.
It was definitely a fun time, a crazy time. One of those things that kind of like, alhamdulillah, I say that, everything that we've done from Muslims for Liberty, from the creation of Muslims for Liberty to the work on the radio show in Orlando, all the way to getting this show now on LRN.FM with its amazing reach that the LRN studios have given us access to, have all kind of fallen into my lap. Davi himself, just kind of fell into my lap one day a few years ago, and alhamdulillah, that's how we've been able to get to where we are now. So now that you're with us, I definitely want to bring you up to speed. Darryl Perry is with us. He's running for the Libertarian Party nomination for their presidential bid this year. But he's also the co-founder of the Shire Free Church. And they've had some issues with being able to get their tax exemption status and being recognized by the state like any other church. And I'd like Darryl to take over for a minute. Everybody mute your mic, and we'll take over and let Darryl tell us about, what he's had to go through and, what the process is up to now.
Yeah, so the Shire Free Church is unlike most churches when you think of a church. So most churches, they seek this thing that the IRS issues called 501c3 status. And the Shire Free Church is not a 501c3 church. We are a free church, meaning that we do not ask for government permission to exist. And in point of fact, IRS regulations even recognize the right of churches and other entities to be nonprofit entities without jumping through the hoops and hurdles and getting that 501c3 status. And that's not where we're having issues. We're not having issues from the federal government. We're having issues from the local government, because the board of the Shire Free Church is seeking tax-exempt status on the property that it owns that is used as a parsonage. And so the city is alleging that they're not actually saying you're not a church. What they are saying is you don't have a parsonage. And in a roundabout way, they're saying it's not a parsonage because you're not a church. But they're not actually saying you're not a church. They're just saying you don't have a parsonage. And
so a parsonage is a place where priests live, right? Essentially, ministers or whatever.
Yeah, it's where the ministers live.
And the house you're talking about is where the ministers live, isn't it?
Yes, it is in point of fact where ministers live.
So, I mean, that's pretty open and shut for me.
Yes, and most people that aren't bureaucrats would wind up looking and saying, there's this church and they meet the IRS standards of being a religious entity, and the ministers live somewhere. Okay, definition of parsonage, where the ministers live. So this religious entity has a place where their ministers live, that would be a parsonage. But
to me, this always feels like analogous to marriage, right? It's like the difference between a couple that has a government marriage and a couple that has a free marriage. And it's like, it's essentially the same thing. People fill out these like official pieces of paperwork because it does them better for tax reasons. But then they're told the tax reasons are an illegitimate reason to do this.
right, but even if we went through the process of getting the 501c3 status, the municipal government could still wind up saying, we don't believe that that's actually a parsonage. So the tax exempt status, as far as the feds are concerned, has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not the local bureaucrats in Keene would wind up even granting the tax status or the tax exemption on the parsonage. And I say that not out of skepticism, but out of actually, looking at various case law and history in New Hampshire, to where entities that are very much recognized as 501c3 churches have had exemptions partially denied. There was one case, I forget the church, but they had part of a garage that was used as storage, and the municipality said, you're not using this for religious purposes, so therefore we're denying this. You have this bathroom that is not used exclusively by people attending the church, so therefore the bathroom is not exempt under the tax exemption that you're requesting. You've got this other room that is used for this purpose that we think is not a religious purpose, so therefore that's not exempt. So the municipality, even when there are 501c3 entities, municipalities still come in and find various ways to wind up, saying, give us our money.
I mean, to me, this another reason this reminds me of marriage is because it just goes to show that all the existence of a license, or in this case, a tax status, is the opportunity to say no. And so it's hard to say in what sense these things are rights, quote unquote, when it's a rubber stamp from an angry bureaucrat away.
So what are some of the arguments they're using against?
During the most recent hearing before the Board of Assessors, which was over the summer, there was a statement by one of the assessors who said something to the effect of, well, I'd feel better if they had a church building. So, on the one hand, they are kind of hinting of, we don't think they're a church because they don't have a church building. But it was pointed out that the local friends...
That doesn't make any sense. I've seen plenty of churches that were houses, So,
yes.
Yeah.
And that was pointed out to them, and they still, we would feel better, or at least I would feel better.
I mean, this is
We'll have more to see from bureaucrats on the other side. We'll be right back. We are back. Good Sunday evening. This is Will Coley, joined by a colorful cast and crew tonight, and we are on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. So we've got Alexander Snitker with us from Central Florida, and Davi is online with us, of course. Our most amazing co-host is with us from California, and Paul from Nashville, and then we have Darryl W Perry in the LRN studios in Keene, New Hampshire, broadcasting live with us tonight. So, yeah, this is absolute insanity. Like the off-air talk that we've kind of been going through about like what has happened here. Darryl, what are some of the arguments that they've used against you here? Like, are they attempting to argue against? Are they stating that the beliefs of the church are something that there are something that get in their way of allowing you to have this status that you're looking for? Is it the what you do? Is it your lack of belief? Like, what exactly is it that they're arguing that they're saying like keeps you from being able to have this?
It's more who we are, not what we believe. So during the very first hearing that was about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago, it was argued, well, you guys are political activists, and so therefore we don't believe that activists can have a religious doctrine, so therefore denied.
That's so absurd, though. Like, many of the famous activists throughout history have been ministers in some church or another.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, Locke was a Christian, Tolstoy was a Christian, Ibn Rushd was a Muslim, St. Thomas Aquinas was a Christian, Rothbard was an atheist Jew, but he referred to himself as an atheist Jew.
No, I don't mean they're religious. I mean they're ministers. I'm talking like Martin Luther King Jr. is a reverend.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Like Malcolm X, yeah. Malik Shabazz El-Hajj, basically.
Imagine that. People of conscience are upset about politics.
Right? Who would have thought? No way that people of conscience would be worried that thieves and murderers are running the country. I would be more upset that people of conscience aren't upset that thieves and murderers are running the country.
So does the city provide you any counter argument, or did they just say no?
They basically say no. The Board of Assessors will throw up a couple of objections here and there, and we counter them, and then they still just say no. And they've tweaked their objections a little bit from the first year to the second, and we're most likely going to wind up applying again this year, and then we'll have another meeting sometime over the summer, and they'll throw up another objection. We assume that they'll throw up an objection because that's what they do, because they want their money. That's really what it's all about. They want their money.
Well, why don't you explain for us the beliefs of the Shire Free Church? Like, tell the listeners what kind of people are the government attempting to extort here? Like, what kind of religious tradition? Like, some people argue that that religion should be taxed, that religious tradition should be taxed because of this belief or that belief. What is it in your religious tradition? Tell everybody. Tell me. I'm pretty interested in knowing. What does the Shire Free Church advocate? What do they teach? What is your doctrine?
Right. So the Shire Free Church is a Unitarian-ish sort of church, to where it's not, designated of you must be a Christian, or you must be a Muslim, or you must be a Buddhist or a Hindu or pantheist, or fill in the blank religion or faith or spirituality. So the Shire Free Church is open to everyone that is of peace. And I'm actually going to read the declaration of the Shire Free Church from church.shiresociety.com. And it reads, the Shire Free Church offers a sanctuary for those seeking an escape from state churches. The Shire Free Church is an interfaith, diverse group of people who may not share identical theological beliefs. As a member in or minister of the Shire Free Church, you are a sovereign individual and may be the faith of your choice, whether it be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, Jewish, Quaker, etc., or follow your inner light. Monotheist, polytheist, pantheist, panentheist, and atheist are all welcome, as long as you are peaceful. The Shire Free Church was organized in Keene in the year 2013, and serves all of the Shire. And now we have our mission, where we say we don't claim to have all of the answers. We are open to all peaceful people. We want to learn from each other. It is our mission, inspired by God, Allah, the universe, and inner light, to foster peace. We understand that in order to have peace in the world, one must have it inside oneself first. The purification of the soul, as our Muslim friends call it. And then we have a statement of beliefs that says what unifies the Shire Free Church and its diverse members is peace, love, and liberty. There are many paths to God, one for every individual. The Shire Free Church does not define a specific path beyond those parameters that must be your foundation. Peace is your way, love as your guide, liberty as your light.
I love that last one.
And Davi, I understand that you actually helped sculpt the language of some of this, whether you know it directly or not.
Yeah, I think at some point an early draft was sent to me, I guess to sort of have some Muslim cred in some of the verbiage. But I've been involved in the Shire for a long time. I did the calligraphy on the Shire Declaration. I realize the church isn't the same thing, but
the church is actually sort of an offshoot of the Shire Society. So one of the requirements for being a minister of the Shire Free Church is that you have to be a signer of the Shire Society Declaration.
Well, I'm definitely that.
Yeah, me too.
Congratulations, you can be imams with the Shire Free Church if you so wish.
Yeah, so I have a question about that. So it says within the Shire, but I remember when the Shire Society was first being conceptualized, it was not tied to geography. So can I declare my kitchen here a piece of the Shire, and therefore...
You could declare all of your kitchen. You could declare part of the bathroom, a third of your garage.
I declare my secret Liberty bunker up here in the Smoky Mountains. This is now a piece of the Shire, and this is the capital of that piece of the Shire. I'm going to call it Peru, and I'm the vice regent of Peru. Yep, I am.
You're going to get confused with the other Peru.
I don't care. I just think it sounds cool. Like Peru County. I'm in Peru County of the Shire. This is Peru County. My little Liberty bunker is Peru County of the Shire.
You need to have
it's 26 hours away. Oh, if it was only
what's that,
Daryl? Will needs to have a conversation with King Mark, who has decreed that any place named after another place has to change its name.
I thought he was like Galactic Emperor by now.
Yeah, he's King Mark something of the universe.
Yeah, ultimate ruler of the universe.
Something of all he purveys, or I forget exactly what his title is. But one of his decrees a couple days ago was that places that have the same name as another place need to change their name. And he would not even allow the town of Utah, Alabama to keep its name because it sounds like the state, even though it's spelled completely different. It's spelled EUTAW. He was like, no, that's too close.
Is he sending letters to these cities? He should really be sending decrees if he's serious about this.
I don't think he sent any correspondence to anyone. He was just ranting.
I could see Mark going full on Vermin Supreme with this thing and like turning this into because
I have
no need for your election.
I think
I am the grand great
in
king.
California. There's a Eureka and a Yreka, and they're both in Northern California, and neither of them are spelled like they sound. It's really an injustice to, I don't know, human phonics. If Mark could get on that specifically, I'd appreciate it.
And we're back. So, Sunday night, Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. I'm back with you guys again. We've got the full lineup still here with us. Alexander Snitker from Liberty Underground Radio in Tampa. My amazing co-host with the most, Davi Barker in California. Current Libertarian Party presidential nomination candidate Darryl W Perry, and Paul Galloway from the American Muslim Advisory Council and the American Center for Outreach. And when we were off on break, Paul brought up a very good point, and I definitely wanted to get that out. And so what was this? You lived in Texas for a while, and you were privy to a lot of the stuff that was going on down there. And what was it that you guys?
So I'm a Texan through and through, born in El Paso, and in Houston, where I'm from, there was a big hoopla going on because of the city of Houston doesn't really have zoning laws as a overarching structure, and a strip club bought some property next to a church, and there was a big legal fight over it. The owner of the strip club redesigned, and what I'm saying is just took his architecture work and named a portion of it as a sanctuary. And before it was called like the dungeon, and then it became the parish. And started to sue the city over saying that he's a church. And I know the lawsuit progressed. I'm trying to find the actual outcome of it right now. But if in a major city like Houston, this kind of thing can happen, a church that actually is a recognized religion should definitely be able to get, tax exempt status.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And the Shire Free Church is not the only church in New Hampshire that's currently fighting for property tax exemptions. There's also the Church of the Sword out of, it's either Manchester or Concord. And then there's the Peaceful Assembly Church up in Grafton. And unfortunately, there was a fire at the Peaceful Assembly Church a couple of weeks ago, and the minister wound up dying in that fire. But there's still, and they actually have a church building in Grafton. The Peaceful Assembly Church has a church building. It was a church before the current owners bought the church, but whatever denomination or congregation was there had stopped using it for churchy purposes, wound up getting rid of it. The current owners purchased it and requested the tax exempt status, and the town of Grafton said no. And so they've been fighting that for several years. The Church of the Sword actually went to the Supreme Court last year, and the Supreme Court decreed basically that the Church of the Sword, while they have church in the name and they do some stuff that are, kind of rituals, they don't necessarily fit the definition, the state definition of church, even though they definitely fit the federal definition. So there's conflict as far as in the state of whether or not the federal definition of religious institution or the federal definition of church should even be considered by locals when making determinations of whether or not anyone has a religious institution or religious belief.
All right. Well, I got a solution. Okay, Davi, you're moving to New Hampshire soon, right?
Yeah, definitely within the next year.
Okay, so Davi moves to New Hampshire, inshallah, because I'm married and I have to live with my wife. So no, I'll be in New Hampshire whenever she's cool with it. But Davi, when he moves to New Hampshire, you host Jummah prayer in your living room, and bam, there you go.
You can call it a mosque?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of those all across. Like, we went to a mosque in Orlando. It was actually the one we preferred because there's an amazing Quran reciting sheikh there named Abdullah Deeb. He's from Syria, and he just has a really, really beautiful voice and a very even candor. Anyway, the mosque that he was the imam at wasn't actually the closest one to our house, but we went there anyway, and it was a duplex that was used as a mosque. They knocked, put a door between the two sides of the duplex, and you had a duplex side, like a full side for the women and a full side for the men, and they had like the speakers and the whole thing, and but it was just basically two houses, that were slammed together, and it was a mosque. And they even have another one in Ocoee where it's a duplex, and the front half of the duplex is a mosque, and the back half of the duplex is a house, and the imam and his family live in one half of the duplex, and they use the other half for the masjid. So I don't see why you couldn't live in the masjid. Like, why not? What's the difference? Your house is the masjid. Your living room on Fridays, for all intents and purposes, is the masjid. And now, like, that doesn't just make it a parsonage. Now it actually is a house of worship.
Yeah, and one of the things that we requested, in addition to calling one half a parsonage, we did call the other half a parish house, which is not a legally defined term in statute, but it is used in statute when listing various things that are to be granted parsonage, or rather tax-exempt status. So there's parsonage, parish house, and houses of worship, and this, that, the other thing. Most of those things are defined somewhere, either in statute or there's a general definition. And the best definition that I could find of parish house is it could be used as a parsonage, it could be used as a fellowship hall, it could be used as a house of worship, it could be used as any of those things at any given time, it could be used as all of those things at the same time. So it's a very blanket term that I feel fits very fittingly with what we have, but still the city, basically, the Board of Assessors just said no. And again, it's one of those things to where they're not actually answering the question of why are you saying no? Just the question is, should there be a tax exemption? And they're saying no. So they don't have to explain why they're saying no, unfortunately. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll wind up actually having a case that goes either to Superior Court or the Supreme Court, to where, and I don't like saying, we're putting this in the hands of a guy in a robe, but, somebody that is not the Board of Assessors is at some point going to have to answer this question and try to explain their rationales for why they're saying either yes or no.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes it kind of comes down to a guy in a robe. I mean, that's why, mankind, even in a stateless society, you have institutions that are set up to settle these kinds of conflicts. Now, if there was a stateless society, this particular conflict wouldn't exist. But that doesn't change the fact that even in stateless societies, these types of institutions do exist to kind of arbitrate these types of differences where there is a complete inability for the two sides to come to an agreement, and
right.
You see this, like we saw this in Murfreesboro, where close to where Paul lives at, where you had the mosque in Murfreesboro, where they were basically going out of their way to try to prevent the building of it, and then not only the building of the mosque, but the installation of the graveyard. And what I found, I think, the funniest about that whole thing was it was Tea Party groups and right wingers who were employing the EPA, which is something that they supposedly are ideologically against, as a way to try to block this mosque from being able to be built on this property that the Muslims in that area had bought. So with you guys, they're trying to block your ability to get the status for the property. For them, they had the status, and now they want to prevent them from being able to use their private property to build what they want on. And again, it comes back to the same exact thing. You're having to ask the state for permission. Like the government, the state itself, is this great god that we should all just sit and beg for its permission. And when we get back, we'll talk more about begging the state for its permission and the finger that we give it instead. On the other side, on LRN.FM, the call to freedom. We'll be right back.
Hear you.
And we're back. The call to freedom on LRN.FM. It is 11 o'clock on a wonderful and chilly Sunday night. For those of you who aren't watching the Super Bowl, you are here with us this evening. We've been talking about the Shire Free Church and their struggles to get the government permission slips for tax-free status. Currently, the government is extorting the Shire Free Church for around $6,000 a year. Is that correct, Darryl?
That is correct.
And Darryl has been working feverishly with the courts in order to try to get the government to stop extorting the Shire Free Church for such a large amount of money per year, so that the church can use those funds for the greater good of society rather than giving them over to the state so that the state can use them for, well, what they usually claim is the greater good of society, but, 21,500 bombs dropped in the Middle East in the course of 2015 or something like that, along with the rise of the police state, the rampant abuse of power, corruption, all of these things that our government spends our money on, and the Shire Free Church would like to use that money to put back into their community rather than to use toward the further destruction of their community. And, we really appreciate when we hear about people, fighting back in big ways like this. That's something actually that Paul has been doing over the course of the last few years of his life, particularly the last few months. There's been a huge scandal, if that's what you want to call it. It's been popping up in places all over the country. I've seen it in Missouri, I've seen it in Illinois, I've seen it in Florida, and I've seen it here in Tennessee, where basically, much like what happened with the Tea Party movement back in 2009, 2010, this quote-unquote anti-Muslim voice kind of crept in and basically took over the infrastructure that was created by many activists who were fighting against state control of education, against the federalization and the cookie-cutter type of education that's being offered by the federal government through programs like No Child Left Behind, which was an utter failure and paved the way for a new utter failure known as Common Core, which our other guest co-host tonight, Alexander Snitker in Florida, has done quite a bit of work on as well. So I figure I'll turn it over to Paul and let him tell you kind of what's been going on and how people in our state are attempting to employ the state in order to push their own ideological agendas.
Thanks, Will, man. What's going on is unbelievable. In fact, State Representative Sheila Butt has a bill, and it's HB 1418 for those of Tennessee who are looking. And the bill basically says that no religious doctrine can be taught in public schools until the 10th grade. And what's amazing about that is Representative Butt is a pastor's wife. She has several books in which she very strongly promotes basically culture war type of ideology, where she's pushing Christian identity through both her office and through her writings, and even supported a bill last year to make the state book of Tennessee the Bible. That ultimately failed. And what's so interesting is to see them essentially kind of torpedo their own position in order to further the fear-mongering against Islam and Muslims. I went to a Tennessee Pastors Network event in which they had Ted Cruz's father as the keynote speaker. And it was in the steps of Legislative Plaza in Tennessee. And I spoke to one of the co-directors of the Tennessee Pastors Network, and I asked him, what is all this religious indoctrination, talk about? What are you so afraid of when it comes to Islam in public schools? And this is a pastor, leader of a church. He told me with a straight face that one of the students that he met, this is his claim, came home from a 7th grade class over the 5 pillars of Islam. Just the ABCs of what Islam is all about, and told their parents that the God of the Bible, I'm quoting, is not the only God or the only way to salvation. And then in front of her parents, fell into prostration and said that the Muslim God also can get you there. And this is what the pastor told me in person. So I asked him, I was like, wait a minute, you want me to believe that a non-Muslim teacher in a public school with no other Muslim students, because I checked all this with him, and he confirmed all of that, is now teaching kids to become Muslim? And I said, why is that? How would that happen? And his response was, well, Governor Haslam has a lot of oil money in his interests. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that he was telling me this stuff with a straight face. And it's just pure classic fear-mongering. And we went through this in Texas 2 years ago. There's an excellent documentary on Netflix that's called The Revisionists. And if you watch it, you'll see step by step that the exact same people affiliated with the Eagle Forum in Texas, people affiliated with the Eagle Forum here in Tennessee, are using this to basically rewrite history across the board. The case in Texas was with McGraw-Hill textbooks, where here in Tennessee it's about Pearson textbooks. But essentially it's all the same arguments. And if you remember, just a few months ago, there was a big controversy over the new McGraw-Hill textbook in Texas where slaves were actually labeled workers. And it became all over the news. And that's the exact same book that came out after they were done trying to rewrite history based on fear-mongering of the Muslim community. And when you look through what's included, it's basic history, and even their own experts on radio. I have audio recordings of they call them experts. They're not qualified. They're basically kind of self-styled anti-Muslim propagandists. And in one of their town halls held here in Williamson County, the expert was, the radio host asked, so one of the claims that the Pearson book makes is that Islam spread peacefully and through respecting other religions. And then their expert replies, well, that's not untrue, but they're not telling the whole story. And what they're really trying to do is one of two things. Either to make sure that Islam is being villainized through state textbooks, or, and maybe it's even simultaneously, and or to give, one religion a privileged status where it gets more attention than the others, because their common argument always becomes, the main population of Tennessee is Christian, so why are we spending so much time on Islam in our curriculum? As if history is somehow should be learned only by, the people's faith that lives in a particular area.
Well, I think that's kind of funny, because I always thought of like the history of Western society post the Constantinian Reformation, so to speak, as the history of Christianity, because that's basically what it is. It's the spread of Christian society from Rome to Europe to the Americas. I mean, that's what it is. That is what Western history basically is. And Middle Eastern, quote, and Near Eastern, quote, history is the study, is the history of the spread of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. Like there were three major religious traditions that spread in these areas, whereas in the West, outside of the Western neo-paganism, you only really have the one religious tradition, and all of history in Western society is connected to Christianity. I mean, outside of Darwinism, even the Enlightenment is connected to Christianity. Christian thinkers were involved in the thought processes that brought us to the Enlightenment, that brought us to the Renaissance, just like Muslim thinkers were involved in helping to craft the thought processes that brought us to those two historic events. So, I mean, I don't really understand this whole idea of like, oh, well, they're teaching too much about Islam. When I was in high school, we learned about Islam. When I was in 7th grade, we learned about all of the countries, and part of that was learning about Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam, because you had to know about the cultures. Well, when we get back, we'll get more into that, and we'll discuss some more about these efforts to use the state to change textbooks on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. And we're back on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. It is Sunday night, and we are back with you guys again. We've been talking about this whole textbook controversy that I've been seeing on social media. We brought Paul Galloway on from the American
Center for Outreach.
Yeah, American Center for Outreach. You're also with the American Muslim Advisory Council as well, right?
The Advisory Council.
Yeah, there we go.
American
Muslim
they're two affiliated
Advisory.
organizations.
So we had him on
So
because he's been. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question here. Here's the question about that. Because I haven't seen what's written in these textbooks, and the way that you guys are talking about it, I just got a couple questions. The first one is, are they teaching, are they putting a judgment on what they're teaching as far as the religious goes when it comes to Christians and Muslims and whatever? And look, I have a son. He's in school, but he's only in third grade. So there's no religious thing that I've ever seen them teach them, and I don't want them to teach them any religious thing. I don't care what the religion is. I don't want them teaching any of that in public school at all. Are you saying that they're teaching Christian things in public school, and then they're trying to ban Muslim things in public school that you would consider to be religious teachings? Or is it are they giving it just a really hey, here's Muslims, they are a religion. Here is Christians, they are a religion. Without laying anything more on it than just almost naming them, not to get into what they believe or anything like that, but just the fact that they exist.
So what's happening, or at least what should be happening, and there's some contested stories, but what should be happening is that anytime a theological belief is taught, it should be taught as Muslims believe this, or Christians believe this. It shouldn't be taught as this is the truth that you should accept. And from everything we can find, that's not the case. No one is instructing students to accept any information. They're just telling them what theology is behind different religions, so they have a basic understanding when they're approaching the history of those regions. Now, there has been a few homework assignments that are a little questionable, where students had to write the 5 pillars down. And what's raising everyone's ire, and what they're using as the excuse to attack, is the Shahada, the first pillar of Islam, which is to say there's no God but God and that Muhammad is his prophet. And so what people are saying is that that's indoctrination, because students had to write that down as part of a quiz on what the 5 pillars are. Now, that's clearly, quizzing for comprehension and not saying that the kids are taking the Shahada and becoming Muslims. You can't trick someone into Islam, which is the ridiculousness. And then they even go as far as to call it kids are forced to do a Muslim prayer because they're writing what the Shahada is. I think it actually is helping the students understand the history of everything, because if you don't understand the significance of monotheism coming into the Arab Peninsula at the advent of Islam and the role of the Prophet Muhammad in history, you really can't understand that without the context of some of the theology. It's not exhaustive in any case, but it's that's the claim.
Well, part of what I don't understand is
I don't think there's any right answer here. I mean, I hate to pop your souffle and all, but I mean, I think
no, go for it.
The answer is to abolish the public school, because there is no Aristotelian mean of how much Islam should be taught in school. And so one parent absolutely has a right to have their non-Muslim student learn just the bare bones of history to be competent. And the other parent has the right to have their kid not learn anything about Islam whatsoever. This is an institutional problem in public school that you're always going to be fighting over the curriculum.
Right, and the issue for us is privileging of one faith over another, and I'll give you an example. Right now we're debating a voucher bill, which has been an ongoing debate in Tennessee for years and years. And this year, actually, the voucher bill looks like it has a chance of passing. Opponents to the voucher bill are literally using Islamic parochial schools as a way to kill the voucher bill. And it's not coming from Republicans, surprisingly. It's coming from Democrats trying to scare Republicans out of supporting the voucher bill, saying, if you pass this, Muslims are going to be able to use state money to send their kids to their own schools.
Oh, that worked. They didn't try. It worked. In the past it worked.
This bill is still up for. The bill is still up right now. And
that Muslim Pavlov bell. They did.
And when they did. Here's the thing. This is really important to hear. There's a representative who wrote an amendment actually targeting the Muslim schools, and he basically said that this amendment will set up a structure where there'll be a board that approves what schools can get voucher money and what schools can't. And then he put some criteria down for schools, supposedly if a tradition or a school teaches religious law over secular law and all these other steps. So they're actually kind of using that wink and a nod and elbow in a board structure so that they can exempt certain schools. And these are people who have a long history of trying to put more privilege to Christianity. So while the point is very valid about what parents should and should not be able to do with their kids, I agree with that. What concerns us is the movement to privilege one religion over the other through state means.
Well, from a philosophical anarchist position, I completely am opposed to school vouchers, not because I think that the money should not follow the child, but because I am opposed to government funding of education completely. And if you're going to have some sort of structure like this to where the money follows the child, then there should be some kind of thing set up to make sure that, one, the money does not go to, if you're going to say we can't let it go to these Muslim schools, okay, then it can't go to any religious school regardless of what they're teaching. And two, there needs to be the strings cut, because right now when one of these private schools accepts the voucher money, there's all sorts of strings attached to acceptance of that money. So if I were running a private school, I would not accept vouchers from the government because I don't want their strings. So
and that's actually the case. A lot of these private schools have publicly said they won't do vouchers.
Yeah, so I'm very surprised that the more fiscally conservative people are the ones advocating for this instead of the ones fighting against it.
I've seen down in Florida, we've seen this. I've heard this before because, again, it's one of those things where how do you solve the education problem in the country? It's a really big problem. And what you're looking at here is just a symptom of the actual problem in and of itself. But I think I wouldn't say the most agreeable way, because not everybody agrees with this, but getting the control as locally as possible and then being able to affect how that's done locally seems to be the best way to do it. And again, if you attach the money to the kid and you go with a voucher program, because in the state constitution of Florida, it says that, every citizen or every child will receive an education, which, to be honest with you, it says that anybody, doesn't matter who they are, can receive the education. And they're going to spend money on this stuff. I think that the part that I'd like to get all the religious stuff out of it, though. Like, I understand that, well, if they're going to teach that, then they should teach the other. But I think you should get all of it out of there and say, look, this is something that goes when it comes to your matter of faith, and contact your parents for that part or something like that, or, contact a friend. But anything that does anything other than just identify something in a part of history is something that should be removed. And that goes for all of the religions. It doesn't matter for any one of them. So I have a hard time agreeing with, well, they should teach all these things about Muslims. Well, you know what? I don't think they should teach about any of them. It's reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, but the history part of, like, there's certain things that's said in the Quran that would be like, well, the Prophet Muhammad this, the Prophet Muhammad this. But, though, I don't think that really matters when it comes to certain parts of history, and you shouldn't lay a judgment on it of what's going on at these times. And when it gets into certain historical discussions, I think
we'll get into that on the other side of the break on the Call to Freedom. All right, so we're back here on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM on this beautiful Sunday night. We've still got the whole crew here with us tonight. Packed house tonight. We have a packed house for sure. We've got our always amazing co-host, Davi Barker. What's up, Davi? Are you there? Hello.
Boy, that would suck if we lost Will, and we're probably live then, so we should probably start talking.
Yeah, we should start talking.
Yeah, what's up?
The dead air light is not on.
Yeah,
so
I'm here.
If Will is not speaking, then
I'm speaking. You just guys just couldn't hear me because I forgot that I have a double mute that I have to do when I come in and out, and you guys only have one. I actually have
double mute, man.
Yeah, I have
every time
3 mutes actually that I have to worry about, and yeah, I forgot one of them. So everybody can hear you, but nobody could hear me.
Good to have you back.
So yeah, we're back. And yeah, we were talking about basically what's going on is in Tennessee, you've got this effort to remove the teaching of the Ottoman Empire, or even like the most basic fundamentals of Islam. We're not talking about doctrinal theory here. We're talking about the 5 basics of Muslim belief in the context of history. It's the same as would be discussed about Christianity when the time of Constantine's conversion was discussed in history. But now you have this.
I guess the analogy would be knowing that the Trinity in Christianity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. It's sort of a comparable amount of information.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're studying the Council of Nicaea, which arguably had a huge impact on Western society, as it was the time of the canonization of arguably the most influential book in Western history, then you would have to understand that at the Council of Nicaea, the idea of the Trinity was created and put into doctrine, that it was established as doctrine during this time. So at the same point, when the rise of the Muslim world and Muslim quote-unquote empire started, that started with a man named Muhammad sallam, who said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger. And that's the basic of Islamic belief. And he taught that you should give in charity and that you should fast and, that you should make a pilgrimage. So it's simple basics.
I mean, also, what grade are we talking about? Like, if you're,
give charity.
This is why I say there's no right answer here. Like, there are grades where you probably shouldn't even be talking about religion at all, and there are grades where even the Ottoman Empire might be too adult of a concept if you're like in kindergarten and you're just learning about your state.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in 4th grade. The first time I ever saw
curriculum fights.
Well, the first time I ever saw a picture of the Kaaba.
In context. Go ahead.
The first time I ever saw a picture of the Kaaba was in a 4th grade social studies textbook. In Miss Amos's class.
How long ago was that, Will?
That was a long time ago. That was in Miss Amos's class in Lenoir City, Tennessee, in the 4th grade. So that was, I'm 35 years old now. That would be like 1990.
Wow.
1990.
Yeah, but see, you converted to Islam, Will, so that just goes and proves.
Yeah, that proves their point.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, I learned more about
you were
Islam.
Indoctrinated in the 4th grade.
I learned more about Islam in my sophomore year in high school when I took a world history class at Highland Hills Christian Academy. It's a Christian school that is now no longer there, but it was a Church of God Christian school in Lenoir City, Tennessee, little small Appalachian town. And we learned the 5 pillars of Islam and the basics of Islam and the history of the Ottoman Empire and the Seljuks and the Safavids and all of these people in our world history class my sophomore year in high school. And I had the ability to take that freshman year if I wanted to, but I chose not to. I chose to take it my sophomore year. And this is at a Christian high school. It's a private Christian school. And I'm learning the same stuff that these people are out of their minds about in Tennessee and Illinois and Missouri and Florida. And I mean, it's like every 2 weeks, a new state, a school, a parent is popping up and they're like, no, the state's trying to convert my child because they're teaching them basic history and sociology.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing about it is they use the most ridiculous arguments, kind of like the arguments against the Shire Church. They say things like, for instance, in the 7th grade, there's too much Islam being taught as compared to Christianity. Well, if you just look at the curriculum, again, I'm not here to defend the curriculum, but I'm telling you the way it is. In the 6th grade, they cover the rise of Christianity. And in the 7th grade, they still cover a little bit of Christianity, and then they transition because it's in a linear, timeline. So it's in order of history. Then they cover Islam. So of course the 7th grade is going to have more information about Islam than the 6th grade had. And because the 6th grade is covering Christianity for the bulk of the year, there's going to be less information in the 7th grade. And they use that as a way to tell parents, oh, well, there's X number of days spent on Islam and X number of days spent on Christianity. And it riles people up because they don't actually look at the entire picture. It's fear-mongering at its best. And the funny thing about it is, again, they're willing to say no religious doctrine whatsoever. And these are from people that are, self-professed devout evangelicals. They're taking it out. And all the information, that's why I brought up the voucher bill and the amendments to the voucher bill point to they're going to somehow find a way, wink and a nod, to keep the Christian doctrine in and not have any other faith. So it's about privilege. And the funny thing about it, even with this voucher bill, is back in about 2004, there was a Supreme Court ruling about a Cleveland voucher program, where people sued the voucher program, saying that the school money should not go to any parochial schools, meaning religious schools. And the Supreme Court ruled that that's not an establishment of religion because the parent makes the choice, not the state. And so what's interesting here is, when you put a voucher amendment and you're saying it can't go to certain religious schools, they're even disagreeing with the Supreme Court. And at the same time, the whole purpose of a lot of these people's support for vouchers is to subsidize their kids, to take them out of the school system and then put some of that money into the religious schools that they want their kids to be in. It's so hypocritical.
Well, the entire education system as it stands, the government-funded, taxpayer-funded, government-run education system is really nothing more than middle-class welfare.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it that way, it absolutely is.
Well,
what's the difference between a religion and a cult, by the way?
There is
the number of people that believe in it.
I don't even acknowledge that difference. In my own personal view, I don't acknowledge the numbers as the difference between a religion and a cult.
Sometimes it's just one.
Yeah, cult is just a dirty word that was made up by the established religious traditions in order to discredit up and coming religious movements.
It was made up by the majority to demonize the minority.
Yeah, and this is me as a Sunni Muslim, or what's usually defined as a Sunni Muslim. So I'm a person who is a part of an established religion that has a 1437-year-old tradition, as well as the part of the quote unquote majority of that faith. And I still say that cult is just a dirty word. It's a 4-letter word that was created by the leaders of religious establishment in order to discredit and hold down upcoming and new religious movements. And that's the reason why you have these animosities between religious traditions. I actually lectured about this at a number of universities a few years ago. It was one of the lectures I was giving while I was living in Orlando, and I lectured at UCF actually, where I discussed how an established religious tradition will go out of their way to prevent the growth and development and success of a new arising religious movement, and that the animosity of the new religious movement, because of that attempt at preventing their growth, will reflect itself in the revealed texts of that new religious movement. So you have
really interesting about that is that what's so great about libertarians is the focus on the individual. And what happens with that is you're Muslim, you're pagan, you're Wiccan, it doesn't matter. You basically look at a person on their own merits, less the group that they, proclaim to be a part of.
Exactly. And when we get back, guys, we'll definitely get more into that on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. We are back on the Call to Freedom on LRN.FM. Unfortunately, our time draws short. We're coming up on the end of our second hour. We've been doing a lot of talking about basically the use of the state. First, the use of the state to prevent the Shire Free Church from having the opportunity to use its property, its private property, as a parish house or as a house of worship to get the tax exempt status, so that the government will stop extorting them for around $6,000 a year. And then after that, we got into the discussion about the textbooks issue that's been popping up around the country. You have people that basically they take issue with the teaching of basic sociology and its relationship to history as far as religion is concerned. Unfortunately, you can't really really separate culture and history and religion from each other. They are all uniquely intertwined in each society in a different way. And unless you're able to understand each facet of that, it's hard to have a complete and round understanding when you're trying to study these societies in school at an academic level. So getting back to the discussion that we were going into, basically, everybody here agrees that's on the air that school vouchers are a crap idea to begin with. But that since they do exist, like you have them in Florida where you live, Alex. They have a voucher program there in Florida.
Yeah, but it's still a limited one though. It's not like a complete voucher program where you can just pick anything. You know what I mean? There's a lot of restrictions on it, and
well, I know that there's
the teachers still want to keep their money in the government school. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's a school in the Islamic Society of Central Florida has a huge mosque on Goldenrod, and they have a school that's there, and it's voucher. You can take the school vouchers to that school and go to school there. And there have been efforts basically to write voucher programs here in Tennessee, but to exclude certain religious traditions and to basically create a favoritism with the Christian community and state, well, we'll have a voucher program, but only the Christian kids and the Jewish kids are allowed to use the voucher program. If you have a Muslim school, then the students who go to that private school will not be allowed to utilize this program, which creates a situation of the state is now discriminating against an entire portion of the populace, an entire religious tradition within our borders. And that's something, even as a person who doesn't advocate for borders or the state in general, it's something you have to be a little upset about, that you have groups of individuals who are lobbying the state in order to prevent a certain group from having the same quote unquote privileges, even though they may be at the expense of others, as everyone else does. And I think that's what
cheering the majority, man. What are you gonna do?
Right.
Hey, I said this during the break, and I'll say it again: is that if you're a Christian or a Muslim or whatever faith you are, but let's go with the Christians right now. If you're a Christian, you should be spending your time doing what Jesus told you to do. If you believe in Jesus, and what Jesus told you to do is go out there, of course, spread the word, but you're helping people by being an example in your community, by just being a good person and helping your fellow man and letting them know, hey, I happen to believe in this, or I happen to believe in this. Hey, we got a church over here for you, or whatever. If they spent time doing that and less time going up there and trying to argue their case as to why somebody else shouldn't have the same thing, honestly, there wouldn't be the kind of pushback that Christians have gotten from time to time. And the ones that are actually out there doing that really kind of don't like these people. Like, it kind of annoys them. You know what I mean? But they're too busy trying to help their fellow man to have to worry about what the heck's going on with the ones that are the crusaders, I guess you could put it in a different category. It's just, it's a waste of time for these people.
What's something really important about that is the Jewish community and a lot of Christians and people of all faiths actually have really started to stand with the Muslim community all across America and really stand up to that segment of the Christian community that's trying to exclude them. In fact, on Tuesday, February 9th, at Congregation Micah, which is a Jewish synagogue, we're having a Christian theologian come talk about how you can teach religion without indoctrination at the synagogue. And it's a big public event. It's inviting educators and parents right in Williamson County. So, you do see an interfaith pushback from people, and they do it out of principle. They're not doing it to support Islam. They're doing it to support the Constitution and the First Amendment.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that everybody was supposed to be able to agree on. And that's unfortunate that people will choose to not look at that at certain times and then try to stand on it at other times. I think the hypocrisy on that stuff really does get to me a lot, though, is when people are hypocritical when it comes to their beliefs.
Well, situational Leninism, in my personal opinion, has become like this mental disease that 90% of the population suffer from. Where the kind of like the whole do as I say, not as I do thing. Like it's okay when we do it, but it's wrong when someone does it to us. Like if I slap you in the face, then and you hit me back, like you hitting me back was wrong. But it was perfectly justified for me to hit you first, like just because I felt like it. But if you defend yourself, now you're the bad guy.
Your policy.
Yeah, that's our foreign policy basically, and it's become the way that we as a society interact with each other in general. I mean, it's really
sadly, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely sad and unnerving that, you know, I said this on social media the other day, that we've basically become a society of authoritarians who are too afraid to get to know our neighbor, that we would prefer to use the violence of the state against them rather than take the time to understand them.
Well, I guess it goes into the fact that people want to get in other people's business a little too much and are willing to use the government to do it as well. And that's unfortunate because, you know, honestly, people want to be left alone. If they could just apply that thought of I want to be left alone to just everything else. And even the other thing I think that irks me is that conservatives, and I hate to bash on conservatives on this one, but conservatives believe that the government is bad domestically, which I would agree with. But somehow in the foreign policy arena, it's good. And this isn't real. And again, I'm a former Marine, so I believe in the United States of America as a country. So I guess I'm a statist in that aspect, but I think that we should leave all the countries alone. Like, we should lead if we're going to lead, then lead by example, lead by being a good person. Look, as private charity goes, we give way more money in private charity than we do in government sponsored, foreign aid. And that money's all going to bullets and guns anyway.
Yeah,
and
we could give
going
more.
to install dictators. We would give more if you just let it go. And I hate to say that because you always say, well, libertarians have the panacea. No, but it's about as close as you can freaking get, though, because honestly, if we left everybody alone and then just led by example, hey, you know what? We do take care of each other. If you look at what happens with Salvation armies and stuff, our society's a little hypocritical that way. It goes both ways. If we could just get people to focus on the positive things and stop being moved by the fear, and that's what the rise of Trump, even the rise of Sanders, is just led by fear, and they use that just like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton on the other
oppositional
side
politics.
For their constituent. It's all about, it sucks too, by the way. I mean, it really does suck, but our opposition is your thought there. So
this is why we got to get back to individualism, because this identity politics drives the fear and drives the division.
Well, yeah, because everyone has to fit in a box.
For that boy.
Well, because society's decided we need to collectivize everyone into a box, and there's a checklist, and you fit in the box. Well, here's my checklist. I'm an Eastern Appalachian hillbilly with a long beard and a nice pair of overalls. My favorite kind of music is 50s era bop and old-timey bluegrass music. I am a Muslim. I have been called a sheikh and an imam, though I reject both of those titles for myself personally. I've studied Islamic jurisprudence and lecture on it at schools. So what box do I fit in? Because I don't fit. I'm a white guy from Eastern Appalachia.
You're the Will Cooley box.
Exactly.
That's
I am my
it's a
box.
religion of one.
I have my box, my flag, my independent state of Peru right here. This is my little area. My Liberty Bunker, this is my independent nation right here. My property line, this is my little independent state here. And anything outside of that's none of my business. None of my concern. As long as it's not harming my property or my family, it's none of my concern. I could really care less if there was a strip club 3 doors down from my house or if there was a pagan worship temple across the street. It doesn't bother me. I do not feel threatened in my person, my way of life, my religion, anything, simply by people that are disagreeing with me, living in close proximity to me. And unfortunately for us, that's the end of the night. Again, we have Alexander Snitker with Liberty Underground Radio. Now, are you back on the air yet, Alex?
No, we just moved and we haven't got